Margaret Bourke-White became a cornerstone in the world of photojournalism thanks to her passion and unique way of seeing and capturing the world. With courage and determination, she overcame every obstacle that came her way. Her fellow professionals even nicknamed her Maggie the Indestructible. She was the first woman to serve as a war correspondent and the first to work in combat zones during World War II, as well as the first Western photographer allowed to capture the Soviet industry and the first woman to work for the prestigious magazine Life. In a predominantly male world, she was a pioneer and visionary, laying the groundwork for what we now know as photographic essays and immortalizing crucial moments in history. Margaret Bourke-White went on to become a part of photography history, serving as an inspiration and role model for many, especially women. Her photographs, raw and unfiltered, with a strong social and advocacy character, offer a magnificent portrayal of some of the most significant and challenging events of the 20th century. Join us as we delve into her extraordinary journey, from her early days as a photojournalist to her legacy as one of the most influential photographers of her time. Margaret Bourke-White was born on June 14, 1904, in the Bronx, New York City, United States. Bourke-White and her siblings were raised by a strict mother who demanded high standards of behavior and academic achievement. However, it was her father who had a deeper impact on her childhood as he introduced Margaret to the world of machinery and shared his love for the camera with her, allowing her to help him develop photographs in the family bathtub. It was no surprise, then, that a few years later Margaret produced her first professional series of images of industrial machinery. From a very young age, Bourke-White was very independent, so as soon as she could, she left her family home, much to her mother's dismay. In 1921, Bourke-White began attending Columbia University, where she studied biology. However, tragedy struck shortly after when her father suffered a severe stroke and passed away less than a year later. Devastated by the loss of her father, and possibly in an effort to honor his memory, Bourke-White turned to photography and enrolled in a course at the Clarence H. White School. Later, with the help of a charitable organization for students, she was able to cover her school expenses and moved to the University of Michigan to study herpetology. While at Michigan, Bourke-White began dating Everett Chapman, an engineering student whom she married in June 1924 and moved to Purdue, Indiana. However, the relationship didn't work out, and they ended up divorcing. Being single, she moved to New York and enrolled at Cornell University, where she eventually graduated with a bachelor's degree in biology in 1927. Bourke-White's professional photography career took off in earnest in 1927 when she made a trip to New York and met architect Benjamin Moskowitz. He was impressed by her portfolio and encouraged her to work as an architectural photographer, which she did, but only after moving to Cleveland to be closer to her family. Bourke-White's passion for photographing buildings evolved into industrial sites, influenced by her father and coinciding with precisionist painters. Despite resistance in the male-dominated industry, her work brought her fame, especially with photos of Cleveland's Terminal Tower and Otis Steel. Her editorial career took off when Henry Luce hired her for Fortune in May 1929, making her the first photographer with prominent credit. Later that same year, she moved to New York City to photograph the Chrysler Building and set up her studio in the same location. In June 1930, she traveled to Germany and then to Russia, shifting her focus more towards people and less on machines. Her work in Russia led her to filmmaking, creating 2 short documentaries about the country and collaborating with Erskine Caldwell on book projects about the Great Depression in the United States. In 1936, life became her next big step, being the first female photographer and defining what the photo essay would become. Additionally, she continued working with Caldwell, whom she regularly traveled with on projects and married on February 27, 1939. She covered World War II from her second term at life, becoming the first American female war photographer in the magazine. However, her marriage was strained by her travels, and Caldwell filed for divorce in November 1942. Returning to work as a distraction, she obtained permission to join a combat mission in North Africa, but in December 1942, the ship she was traveling on was torpedoed. In addition to covering the war for Life magazine, she published 2 books. They called it Purple Heart Valley in 1944 and Dear Fatherland, Rest Quietly in 1945. In the years immediately following the war, Bourke-White's daring work for Life gave her the opportunity to capture some of the 20th century's pivotal moments. First, in 1946, she was sent to photograph Mahatma Gandhi, and later published a book about her journey in 1947 titled Halfway to Freedom. Later, in 1948, Bourke-White interviewed Gandhi just hours before he was assassinated. Shortly after, in 1950, Bourke-White traveled to South Africa to document the horrors of apartheid for Life. In 1952, she journeyed to Korea to photograph people she felt had been widely neglected by the world. The last 2 decades of Bourke-White's life were deeply affected by her diagnosis of Parkinson's disease in 1954. Although she was still able to work for a time and even published her autobiography, Portrait of Myself, in 1963, she had to retire in 1969 due to the illness, passing away on August 27, 1971, in Stamford, Connecticut, at the early age of 67. The legacy of Margaret Bourke-White in the world of artistic photography, documentary, and photojournalism is profound and enduring. A true pioneer, Bourke-White not only captured visually impactful images but also infused an element of emotion and adventure into her profession, breaking barriers and challenging conventions throughout her career. Responsible for many historical firsts, Bourke-White was the first industrial photographer, shedding light on the beauty and grandeur of modern engineering through her lens. Additionally, she distinguished herself as the first photographer for Life magazine, where her narrative and poignant images captivated a global audience, addressing topics ranging from everyday life to global conflicts. As the first American war photojournalist, Bourke-White faced unimaginable dangers to capture the brutal reality of conflict, showing the world the human consequences of war and challenging society to reflect on the nature of humanity. Her impact transcended eras, serving as a role model for future generations of professional photographers like Lindsay Addario, Diane Arbus, Mary Ellen Mark, and Susan Mycelas, who have found inspiration in her courage, vision, and commitment to truth. Bourke-White's works are housed in many major museums worldwide, including a prominent collection at the Library of Congress, where her legacy continues to inspire current and future generations of visual artists. Her tireless approach, passion for social justice, and ability to capture the very essence of humanity ensure that the legacy of Margaret Bourke-White continues to resonate in the world of photography and beyond.